Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, and welcome to this month's Patio Perspectives. I'm your host, Paul Salinger, and I want to just start by saying thank you to our sponsor, San Francisco Travel. We're going to talk a little bit more about them a little bit later on. We'll be doing a bag giveaway. And the Patio Perspectives is our monthly series where we talk about everything event sustainability. So today's Patio Perspective giveaway bag is sponsored by SF Travel. As I said, San Francisco Travel is the official destination marketing organization for the city and county of San Francisco. This includes the marketing of Moscone Convention Center, the nation's first LEED Platinum certified convention center, and also has the lowest carbon footprint per delegate of any major convention center in North America. So I'm really excited about today's conversation. Our guest is Anna Abdelnoor from ILA. Anna is the CEO and founder of ILA, the independent industry body supporting the event sector transition to a more sustainable future in line with global net zero targets. As the driving force behind ILA, Anna articulates and leads the sustainability vision of the industry, focusing on direct action, measurable targets, education, and standardization of the sector to accelerate and capitalize on global momentum to transform to a sustainable global society. Having worked with a plethora of agencies on large-scale events for global clients, Anna knows just how capable the industry is in delivering huge projects under pressure and believes the same collaborative attitude is integral to addressing the climate crisis within the event sector. ILA is also the developer of the Trace measurement tool, which we will talk a little bit about a little bit later on. And Trace is quickly becoming the standard for measurement across the industry. Many large events are starting to use it, and so we're excited to have that conversation as well. So welcome, Anna. Welcome to Patio Perspectives.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you and I have had a number of really interesting conversations, and that led to the title for this particular episode. So let's just jump right in to the title of this episode. What do you think? Is it time to ditch the word sustainability, and why?
Yeah, you're really going right in there. Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me here. It's really nice to be able to join your morning/afternoon, my evening. Well, we talked in terms of kind of, is it time to ditch the word sustainability? We talked a lot about this, Paul, in the sense that we need a language to describe what it is that we want to achieve, and sustainability is just one word. It's a noun or a verb. To sustain is the verb. Sustainability is the noun, the act of sustaining, but it's not an adjective. It's not a describing word. It doesn't actually say what you're trying to do or what anybody's trying to do.
Right.
So I think when you just say, oh, we want to be sustainable, what does that mean to anybody? You're not describing or kind of creating a vision or helping inspire or setting any aspirations. It can mean 1,000,001 things to 1,000,000 different people. In the same way that when you say, oh, I want to be healthy, that could mean I want to lose weight. I want to improve my strength. I want to eat better. I want to be able to run further. It means so many different things. And we have a language to describe what it is when we say we want to be healthier. And that means that, people can help us on our journey. People understand what we want to do. It means we can find the resources that we need to achieve that particular goal. So I think when we were talking about the idea of like ditching the word sustainability, it's not that we don't want to be sustainable. It's that we need to find a language to use to describe what we're actually trying to make happen.
Yeah. And so what do you think that language is? I mean, you and I have talked a little bit about the idea of climate literacy. Is that the approach? Is there a more strategic approach to the way that we plan and execute our events? What is the language that we should be starting to think about if it's not just the word sustainability?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think as when you learn any new language, you start with basics, so I think we're all with the basics, we have a knowledge that there's carbon neutrality, net zero, zero waste. There are terms that everybody has in their vocabulary. But then as you expand your ability to communicate, you create more complex sentences, you find new words, and you understand how to hold conversations around that. So I think it's in terms of that language, it's about progressing and building your knowledge, building your capability to communicate. That might mean things like these kinds of webinars where you can learn new concepts, learn new items. It might be reading materials. It might be saying, "Oh, that's something that I find really fascinating." Circularity or carbon. Some people find carbon really interesting, or water conservation, or gardening. All these things that tie into the idea of creating a future that is sort of viable and fit for everybody. It's about building your knowledge in those areas, and
right.
So I think that's the key piece, is to start building on what I've learned and recognizing that that's a stepping stone. Like, okay, I've got a concept, I've got a word. What does it mean? How do I apply it? How do I put it into a sentence? How do I have a conversation with someone about this? How do I become an expert in communicating about that topic?
Right. So is there a way that we can start to educate ourselves and educate our organizations around this idea of, just more knowledge around climate literacy, climate, the challenges of climate, if you will, because I think we're starting to see that there's a tremendous amount of risk that's starting to be created across the industry between floods and wildfires and just warming in general. So how does that relate to what we're doing from an event perspective in terms of, like, what do we really need to know so that we can adequately plan for these kinds of crises that may be threatening our very event industry?
Yeah. I think a large part to your point, how do we build that knowledge? How do we build that language and education? Is that information, that expertise largely doesn't exist within the event sector. It doesn't necessarily exist within any sector. It exists in research spaces and spaces where people have dedicated their time and energy and life. It's the science that is really hard to access and is really hard to digest. But the language of sustainability, the actions of sustainability, there are hundreds of groups and organizations that are established and dedicated to helping people understand, from things like the Carbon Literacy Project is one, for example, which helps people understand what does carbon mean. There are organizations like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which focuses purely on circularity. The knowledge and the information that helps take your understanding and awareness of the subject of sustainability will be found in organizations like that. And as you build your knowledge and you build your awareness in those areas, you create a deeper awareness of how to bring that into your life and into your world and into the event sector. And it's one of the focuses of ILO, is really bringing that literacy and that knowledge into the sector. So we really focus on educating people on some of those core principles. And as people build that knowledge and awareness, we help them place it in their work in the events industry, around what it means to be circular in events, what it means to be zero waste in events, what carbon looks like on an event level. But they first have to understand those concepts. So I think in terms of being able to progress in this space, we need to all become experts. We're experts in so many things in the events industry. We can move tens of thousands of people around a city. We can plan an event in 6 days. We can basically build a new wing on a convention center at a whim when we decide that we need more people. There's so much that we're able to do and become experts in when it comes to events, because we're really practical, and it's very practical. And it's just another string, it's just another layer to add on top, in the same way that, tech and virtual solutions became another thing to learn as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's
Yeah,
not
so
that
it's
we've never ever used them before, but they became a layer on top of our already quite established skill set.
right. Yeah, exactly. And so that's what I was going to say, is that it sounds like what you're advocating for and what we should be thinking about is that event professionals, especially planners, need to just start to think about this as a new skill set that they need to have in their toolbox, so to speak, to be effective as an event planner and even as an event supplier.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was talking with a business travel organization last week, actually, about sustainability and what does sustainability mean in the business travel space. And we got into a conversation around it's not necessarily about what's a sustainable choice that you can make that's an alternative to a more impactful, like negatively impactful choice. It's not necessarily saying, well, we'll take a train instead of a plane. That option isn't always available. There's certain things that just aren't necessarily possible. So the question becomes, how do you think strategically about what your goal is? Those strategic meeting planners who are buying business travel, their goal is to connect people. They are creating connection, and connection doesn't have to mean presence, doesn't have to mean being in the same place at the same time in a face-to-face setting.
Right.
So the conversation became around, how do you achieve your goals when you take that core goal? Not we need to increase ROI or we need 15 people in a room. It's around how do we help people connect, because that's our job. And then what are the options to enable people to connect? How can we plan these meetings strategically that puts connection at the heart of it? And when you start thinking in that way, you're not just saying, oh, we need to move people from A to B, or we need to host a meeting. You start thinking, well, what are the solutions that enable me to connect people, to create the connection opportunities? Does that make sense? Those ideas of, like, within that, you might start thinking around how to leverage virtual or hybrid in a different way. It's not about saying we have to go completely virtual in order to tackle the climate crisis. It's about saying, how do we use virtual more strategically to reduce our impact, but connect people within that.
Yeah.
So there's a real piece around, like, what is it that I'm trying to achieve? What do I want? What's my end goal? And how do I use solutions that already exist? And it's not even about sustainability, but by proxy, by the knock-on impact of that, is that it's a more sustainable choice. Right. Because I'm doing something that has meaning and has impact and has purpose, and I can plan a strategic route around that.
Yeah, and I think what we're sort of talking about is, event planners have always been very, very good at, like, solving specific problems or working through a checklist to, like, these are the tasks that I need to do this event. And I think what we're talking about is we need to take a step back from that a little bit and start thinking a little bit more strategically and looking at the choices that we're making. And it may not always be like A versus B. There may be some gray areas in between in terms of, like, what's the better choice in terms of, like, meeting our overall objectives. If our overall objective is zero waste, what are the actions that we would need to take to get to that, that goal? So I agree with you, and I think it would be great. I don't know if you have any specific examples of, like, a client that you've worked with in terms of, like, looking at their goals and then starting to think about the choices that they're making to get to those goals.
Yeah, so there was there's an event in the UK launched last year called Anthropy, and the goal of Anthropy is to connect people, to create a conversation, and create a discussion around what the future can look like for the United Kingdom, for its citizens, in terms of a sustainable future, a future in which we have clean air, access to water, healthy food, thriving societies, those sorts of things. So this event, the purpose of that event was, we want to connect people We want to bring the theme of nature and of sustainability into the heart of what we're doing. And so that impacted a number of their choices around looking to take the event beyond London. London is an obvious choice. It's where everybody can converge. But what they looked at was, how do we disperse people in a different way? How do we bring different parts of the UK to life, so that we're talking more about, so that we're not just focusing in the cities, because in rural places, in more rural communities, there are fewer opportunities. If we can take an event into a different area, we create more local opportunities, we create more local narratives. So this was some of the thought process.
Mm-hmm.
So they hosted the event in the Eden Project, which is a disused quarry. I don't know if some of you may know it, but it's in Cornwall, which is in the southwest of England. It's quite challenging to get there, and it's got terrible public transport, but it's a disused quarry that's been turned into the world's largest indoor rainforest, basically. And so they hosted the event there, and all of the decisions led them to hosting it at the Eden Project, because it was a place that brought nature into the conversation, that took people into rural areas, that meant they could work with local university students to help plan, deliver the event. It was, all of those decisions were around how to achieve their goal of creating a space to have this creative conversation about the future. So I think what, to that point, as an example, it was around putting their objective at the center of what they were doing in their goal, and not we want to get X many people, or not we want to host X many sessions. It was, we want to achieve this ultimate goal. So that's sort of, I think that's one example of, and it's quite it is quite a unique example, but it was one where this goal and that was really at the heart of how they came to making their decisions.
All right. And do you feel like that those decisions were made from kind of the top level of the organization, or were they made from the bottom up? Because I think a lot of times what ends up happening is the event teams might want to do something interesting like that, might have some specific objectives, but they don't oftentimes have like senior management support, so to speak. So how can event planners and or event organizations begin to take some of these ideas and some of this idea around climate literacy and just changing, looking at their objectives overall and making different choices, and be able to drive them kind of on their own, so to speak, as opposed to waiting for top management to say, oh, let's go do this.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And change happens at so many different levels across organizations, doesn't it? And in some instances, it will be leadership that are driving it. In other instances, it's the meetings and the events teams. I think there's something you said earlier about the impact of climate. And I think in this space, it's about disrupt or be disrupted. We cannot do things as we once did. We are disrupted when we try to do that. You just take Burning Man as an example. It's just, it's also a very unlucky, unfortunate, freakish event, but it's also a really great example of climate catastrophes having these huge impacts. That was disruption that we had no control over. But when you kind of see disruption as a strategic enabler, to say, hey, we need to do something differently to prevent all of these potential risks from impacting us in this way, we can start thinking more creatively. And it's about risk management as much as being sustainable. And I think once you can start bringing that narrative in, that this is about managing risk, this is about ensuring that we're not losing, managing reputational risk, managing like physical risk, in terms of people's safety at these events, managing financial risk, that you're not throwing money down the drain. So kind of that disruption is a strategic enabler to say we need to do something differently. And if I take all of those things into account, I don't want to do this event in the way that I've always done it. It's going to need to look different, and being able to use some of that business narrative. But I also think there's other things like, lots of event teams have carbon budgets now for their travel. And we know that there are some brands that have had to cancel their events for the rest of the year because they've exceeded their carbon budget. So they can't get on flights that have been booked and paid for. They just have to cancel everything. And we're talking, this is like a good third of the year. So from that perspective, that's a financial knock on to the business, not just from money wasted, but from these meetings and events that can't happen that are actually key business drivers, new business and research. And so you think, right, well, actually, if those meeting planners were thinking about sustainability as a strategy, how do we ensure that we can still continue to deliver our aims, deliver the connections, deliver the sales, deliver the training, deliver the research, deliver these meetings, which are all part of our business strategy. But we need to think about our carbon footprint for these and our carbon budget. So we need to become more strategic about how we're planning them. So that might say regional hubs and bringing people into a regional hub rather than flying people around the world. All those sorts of things. I mean, I can't answer the specifics around it, but when you start to think of it around your own objectives and use the language of your organization and think about disruption as an enabler and think about change as an enabler, not something that has to happen to you, because when it happens to you, it's horrible, but when you're in charge of it, it's empowering. So yeah, I think I think it's about looking at it from that perspective.
Are you starting to see, I don't know I don't know whether in the US that we've seen much in the way of events having a carbon budget or accounting for it financially in any way. Are you starting to see that more in the UK and Europe markets?
Not necessarily a carbon budget, but we will. Regulation is changing across Europe in terms of scope, your scope 1, 2, and 3, pretty much everywhere people, big businesses have to report scope 1 and 2, but in Europe particularly, there's been a mandate, and in California as well. I'm sure you're aware that California just passed this incredible law. But that concept around having to report your scope 3, that's going to hit the event sector. And as soon as people start understanding that these activities are contributing to the scope 3 carbon footprint, and there's already carbon budgets for organizations, those things are going to be impacted. And it's going to be there's going to be two things. It's going to be on the event teams to justify their carbon footprint and fight for their budgets or have them cut, and everyone's going to go virtual, which isn't what we want necessarily. And the second thing is around being able to reduce those, plan their meetings strategically, plan their events strategically in line with those carbon budgets, which means having an idea of, being able to compare apples and pears. If I do this, it has a higher carbon footprint, so I'm just going to do this instead, which isn't lesser or less meaningful or less impactful or a bad choice. It's just, actually, I can suddenly start comparing that this is what I'm going to have.
Yeah. And it kind of that starts to come back to the conversation where we started the conversation in terms of climate literacy. I mean, I don't even know how many event planners actually understand what scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions are, and where how they would apply them to their events. So, again, it comes back to starting to develop a skill set, starting to develop a knowledge set around some of this stuff, so that as regulations and laws come into play, you have that knowledge to start to think about these things much more strategically than we have in the past.
Yeah, totally. I think we in the UK about 2 or 3 years, maybe 2 years before COVID-19, we introduced something called IR35, which was basically a law around how you work with contractors and freelancers. And certainly in the UK, and I think a big part in the States as well, the event sector is run on freelancers. And it basically was this law that came in, and it had been coming in for quite a while. And it happened, and it basically said that that there are certain conditions under which you would count someone a freelancer or a contractor.
Right.
And it basically meant that you couldn't be a sole trader anymore. It meant you had to be a limited business. And agencies and brands didn't want to work with sole traders anymore. They wanted to work with limited businesses, but the industry is set up on sole traders. and they had to make sure that they weren't being tax evasive when working with contractors. Sorry, it's a bit complicated, but the point is that it was quite simple concept with quite simple regulations, and it just collapsed the leaders in the industry. I remember the conversations where these agency leaders were scrabbling around and had no idea what they were doing and were freaking out, and they wasted sleep and energy and time. And one of the big things was Isla was using IR35 as an example and saying sustainability is going to be bigger than that. Your carbon footprint is going to be bigger than that. The impact in this space is going to be way bigger than that. So let's start getting ahead now. Let's start preparing now. Let's start getting that understanding happening now.
Yeah.
And they understood that. They were sort of like, oh, because it was a risk management piece as well. It made sense. It was that point. So just because it wasn't legislation, and legislation is still coming into practice in Europe, leadership understood that need. So I think it's literacy in lots of different ways. It's not just the language of carbon or the language of circularity, but it's also the business language and how sustainability plays into that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just shift the gears a little bit here. So how should we think about the idea of continuous improvement? Because that's a little bit of what we're talking about. How should we think about the idea of continuous improvement within the framework of a more strategic approach? And then even, I've been thinking about this a lot, even creating a culture of sustainability, if you will. I've been working on my next blog for this series, and it's titled Creating a Culture of Sustainability. So I wanted to hit you up a little bit on that question and see what your thoughts might be.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I think for continuous improvement, you have to know where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the biggest challenge for people, is that, so, there is without a doubt the knowledge across the sector that something has to shift and that things can't go on as they are, and that everybody has this impetus to say, I want to do it less badly. But until you know where you are, you cannot improve. You cannot move forward, because you could, without having that starting point, you might be going backwards, you might be going left, you might be going like this. So I do think when we talk about measurement, and I don't necessarily just mean carbon, although that's actually quite an easy place to start in honesty, but I don't just mean carbon. I mean like having a target and setting yourself a baseline. So that might be something tactical, like saying, on this event, we want to measure where our plastic usage is happening, so that we can get a baseline. It's not saying we want to reduce it. It's not saying we're going to swap out our plastic water bottles or, get rid of lanyards, although you can do all of those things as well. It's about saying, we want to understand the picture that we're painting right now. And then once you've got that, at the end of the event, we've monitored it, we checked it across transport, across production, across the hotels, across catering. This is where our plastic was coming from. Now we can say, right, well, we can get rid of it from here. So next time we can have a step and an improvement by saying, well, that was completely unnecessary. We don't need plastic water bottles on site. We have refill stations. Again, it's a very basic example, and lots of people are already moving away from plastic bottles. I understand that, but it's those sorts of concepts. It's the areas in which you know that there is impact: meat, plastic, rubbish, emissions, transport. Where are they coming from? And once you start knowing that and really building that picture, you can then look at your continuous improvement. That's kind of part A. And I think in terms of culture, I think creating a culture is talking about it, making that part of it, your meetings, making it part of your kickoff meetings, your creative meetings, your planning. And that's how you build that language, you build that expectation, you build knowledge, you build new thinking into people's psyches. And that's where you get that culture piece. It's not the way that you necessarily build it and develop it, but it's certainly a starting point for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it becomes institutional knowledge. I mean, you have to almost institutionalize this idea if you want to create a culture of sustainability. So let's shift and talk a little bit about measurement. I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit here, but how should event planners think about measurement maybe differently than they have been thinking about it? In terms of meeting those strategic objectives and goals that we've been talking about? And how do you think about measurement, having developed a measurement tool?
I Well, I can probably start with the first, that latter end. I think measurement is critical in pretty much every aspect of everything that has ever touched in life, from both personal right through to kind of professional. You know, measuring progress is something that we do naturally. Like my child walked 2 steps today instead of 1. My child can do 5 words. You know, it's always about progress, and it's that. So I think measurement is really around showing you where your opportunities lie. And we do measurement across events all the time. Have we hit our target for registrations? Have we hit our targets for exhibitors? Have we hit our targets for online registrations? Those sorts of things. Those are ways to measure.
Yeah.
And when you start to capture that data, you start to understand where your gaps are, and where your successes are, and where to focus your energy and attention. So when it comes to measuring your event impact in terms of your carbon footprint, in terms of your physical impact, your waste, your food, all those sorts of things, as you start collecting information about them, you can start to see where your hotspots are.
Yeah.
And let's call it what it is. Travel is always going to be a hotspot, but it's not the only impact area that exists. And if you start looking more broadly, what are we feeding people? What are we building our stages, our sets, our creative footprint, our overlay with? When you start looking at that and looking at your volumes, looking at the carbon associated with it, where it's coming from, where it's going, how much are you putting into trash compactors, how much are you discarding, how much are you reusing, you get all this really incredible rich data that helps guide what you're doing. So I definitely see measurement as just a really, really, really powerful tool. If you can look and say, hey, I do exhibitions, I do conferences, I do strategic meetings, and I do gala dinners, and I've measured all of my events footprint over the last year. And you know what? Over and over and over and over again, it's my gala dinners footprint that is coming out the highest. I don't need to worry about my exhibition booth. I don't need to worry about my conferences. I'm going to spend my time bringing down my gala dinner footprints. It means you don't need to waste time in areas that you have a good impact in. You're like, well, that works. Why would I change that? This is where I need to change. And I think that's what people don't understand yet about data and measurement around sustainability.
Yeah.
And that's the bit that we get excited about Trace, because once people start seeing this and seeing their data on a dashboard and visualized, they're like, oh my God, okay, I get it. Oh, that's what I changed. That's
Right.
how I talk to my client. That's how I talk to my boss. That's how I talk to my team. Because it's so powerful.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about the Trace tool then, why you developed it, how you see the value of it, compared to other tools in the event industry at this point, and how are organizations using it?
Sure. So Trace, I built Trace before I even started Isla, actually. It was the foundation for which Isla was established. The number one purpose when Trace was created was to be able to get a picture of the whole event industry. The idea was that the more people measure their footprint, the more people use the platform, use the tool, the better insight we will get. And we can then provide guidance at an industry level on how people can respond and what actions they should take. So in April this year, we actually released our first report with data from Trace. We used a set of data about UK events in a 6-month period, 135 of them, to be able to take a kind of temperature check of events. And we were able to spot patterns and trends and show information at an industry level. And that was really exciting. So one of the things that we want to do with Trace is to create a global industry carbon baseline for the event sector. So by the end of 2025, we plan to have done that. That will be using thousands of events to capture the data, to understand what the average footprint of an exhibition or a conference or a dinner or an activation or an experiential marketing campaign, what the average footprint looks like, where the hotspots are, those sorts of things. So that was really the core focus of Trace.
And is that tied into the idea of getting to net zero?
Yeah.
It's
that decarbonisation journey.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And we have data at like an industry level as kind of the proprietaries of Trace, and then our clients can look at their footprint at an individual event level and a consolidated level.
Mm-hmm.
And they can consolidate that information in lots of different ways. They can consolidate it based on region, based on client, based on type of event, looking at their whole event footprint, and people are using it in different ways. So we have brands that are rolling it out across all of their agency partners so that they can get a consolidated view of their event program. We're seeing, exhibition organizers in the exhibition sector use it to measure their impact, and their plans actually are to start getting their exhibitors to measure their impact, because those exhibitors contribute overall, but they're not obviously in the direct control always of the organizers. So they're using it in lots of different ways, but fundamentally they're all using it to enhance their knowledge and understanding as well, because as you use it, you build some of that literacy that we talked about.
Right.
By accident, it sort of happens to you, and that's a lot best way to learn, and how lots of event people learn by doing. You learn things on the job, not just as a concept, but as a practical tool.
So this to me is one of the exciting things is this idea of like being able to aggregate data across the industry, because I think it's the one thing that we've really been lacking, to try and get people to understand what our actual impact is across the event industry. We tend to measure things from an economic impact, like when we go into community, we're contributing X number of millions of dollars economically, but we don't have any data, or we have limited data in terms of like any potential negative impacts that we're having on these communities. So a question I might have, or people might have is, if they're not using the Trace tool, but we still want to contribute to this idea of aggregating across the industry, could people, send you, for example, a report that they may have done on an Excel spreadsheet or through another tool that could easily go into the Trace tool, so that you can start to keep track of, what people are doing and be able to get a really true picture of, the overall event industry?
That's a great question, and definitely something that I think as an organization we would be able to facilitate. It's not something that I've actually thought about previously in terms of using as a platform, as a piece of software. We're constantly iterating, and we're looking at APIs and integrations and how we get data out of other platforms so that it can pull into Trace, so that we can see that, but haven't so much thought about that in terms of kind of the individual contributing data. But it's definitely something that we as an organization could facilitate in due course and take that on board. You were successful, Laura. That is correct.
And I know Trace is not just measuring carbon. And can you talk a little bit about some of the other areas that you are measuring, like food or water or energy, or because I think there are so many different aspects of an event that in a lot of ways do tie back to carbon and do tie back to waste, that people don't necessarily think about as something to measure, and so we miss some components.
Yeah, exactly. But to that point, that was the thing, as you start using it, you start realizing that there are all these things that have these impacts. So the platform measures for all of it looks at energy usage, like what kind of energy are you using, and we produce a carbon report on energy. It produces carbon data on energy, but it also helps you look at, are you using, what kinds of energies are you using? Are you using biodiesels? Are you using, dirty diesels? Are you using renewable energy sources? Those sorts of things, which are really valuable data. It's at catering from the perspective of like how are you serving foods? What kind of materials are you using? How much food waste are you producing?
Right.
Like all of that, we also can produce a carbon footprint from as well. But it's also all those elements of being able to understand the how of what you're doing. Once you start thinking about it, everything's on disposable serveware. God, now I'm seeing that and I'm capturing that data in terms of measuring my impact. Why are we doing everything on disposable serveware? In some instances, it's going to be because it needs to be, and in others, it's going to be because someone just didn't think strategically or think about the impact. So as you're using, so it captures all sorts of different details, but particularly with regards to like the source of your materials. Are you using virgin materials? Are you using new resources to create your event? Or are you thinking about that circularity and where you can repurpose or reuse, etc.? But then also, where's it going? And are you bringing it back into a system, or are you taking, making, and wasting? Or are you reusing, redesigning, rethinking, and bringing it in? So it measures across lots of different things. You get your footprint out of it, you get your waste out of it, but you also get that that information, that nuance information that helps you build a different picture.
Yeah. And do you feel like, is there an example for, that where you worked with an event, they put all this data into Trace, and then you went back to them and said, based on what we measured from this event, here's some recommendations about where to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. That's when so as an organization, we do quite a few different varied pieces of work, and Trace is one set of that. But within our kind of consultancy, within our action groups, within our resources and everything that we put out, we take information and we're able to make those recommendations. So we develop carbon reduction plans with clients where we're looking at their baseline and helping them map out, targeted reductions in carbon and waste, because with the data that they've got, and helping them to do that. And those are that's not inbuilt into Trace at the moment. That's something that we want to build into Trace. We want to create a platform that does everything for you, not just measurement is step one, understanding is step two, step three is action, step four is reduction, step five is reporting that. And we want to create a platform that takes everybody through that. And so that kind of, we've got a continuous improvement program for Trace as much as just a continuous improvement program for the industry.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about reporting, because that's one of my big, I try to talk to people when I'm working with event teams in terms of like, okay, it's great that you're measuring all this data, but how are you reporting it? Does anybody actually know what you're doing? How are we actually telling the story? How are you seeing reporting facilitating itself out of all of this data?
It's definitely a big focus for us to help the industry learn how to report. It's actually part of our next sort of 6 months of roadmap of the platform, is helping people report from the platform directly in the right way. Because people don't know how to report. It's a real skill. And data and understanding your data and communicating meaningfully with that is a skill. And I don't actually think I think event planners need to learn it, but we always report, we always debrief post event, we're always looking at stats, all those sorts of things. But it is it's an interesting one, because I think no one's getting it right. And that's not just that's not events. So few people are doing it in events. I mean, even Apple in their recent campaign, lots of beautiful storytelling, but not reporting the right kinds of information. But people don't know, and I think there's a disparity. Marketing, the reports go to marketing because marketing deal with communications and messaging, and marketing's default is to make everything good. You want it.
For sure.
That's the job of marketing. That's great. I love it. But marketing teams need to learn a new skill, and they kind of need to learn a bit of humility, actually, which is, we've done some stuff, but this journey that we're on, it's a long journey. we haven't solved the whole problem right now. This is what we plan to do. This is where we want to take things. This is what we are doing. This is where we really, really need to get better. And these are the steps that we're taking to enable us to do that. Check back in next year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
we'd expect them to say next year, we did these things that we said we were going to do.
yeah. I know when I was at Oracle, when we did our reports every year for a big conference, there was always a section on opportunities. So what were the things that we needed to continue to work on? Gets back to that idea of kind of continuous improvement. And I personally would love to see more people do transparent reporting and be able to, not only show the successes that they had, but the opportunities that they have for continuous improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the language and the narrative and that kind of climate literacy and being able to have to talk about what you're doing, not just using the word sustainable, ditching sustainability and talking about action and measurable things. To come back to kind of what we originally talked about. But it is a skill. It is a real skill. And I don't blame the event sector for not being equipped right now to do that. And that's where we see part of our job is equipping the event sector, equipping people with the resources they need, because whilst we need people to become experts, and there are lots of ways in which you can kind of become an expert, people need help and people need direction and guidance, and we can't, that's the role that we fill at Isla. So I completely agree there does need to be more transparency. And I love that it's always opportunities. No one ever fails. Everybody always learns.
Yeah. So I'm seeing a question that says, Anna, tell us more about your thoughts around the Apple ad. How could their use of climate literacy have been better?
Oh, well, and it's a tough concept. I mean, Apple, it was an ad. It was an advert. It was not a sustainability report. I think we need to call it what it was. And as an advert, it was amazing. It was such a great advert. I loved it. I got real vibes from it. And the sustainability report, as a sustainability call to action, it was total greenwash. They're introducing a new product, brand new. Doesn't matter that it's carbon neutral. It's new. Buy a new one. Have a new one. There's nothing wrong with your old one, but have this one because it's carbon neutral. And so in terms of kind of bringing the right to repair, that kind of longevity, we've lost longevity for obsolescence. And so I think, as an example, it was a fantastic piece of marketing and it was a terrible piece of sustainability content. is kind of my thoughts on it. And I don't know which one they wanted it to be. So if they wanted it to be an ad, great job.
And my friend Chance is asking, and do we need to even change our label of opportunities? Why can't it be failures? We have this fear of being human, but we are human. As long as there's success, there is no true failure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's an issue with the word failure at all. Fail fast is what people tell you all the time. Fail fast. You fail fast, you learn, and it is okay. And the faster you fail, the quicker you can pick yourself back up and try something new. So there is opportunity in failure, but it's okay that there's failures. Not everything is going to work. And the quicker you fail and you share your experience of failure, hey, this didn't work for these reasons, and so we're trying this next time. And the more that you talk about it and the more that you're okay with that, it means that someone else who's behind you down the road, who's thinking, oh, I need to move forward. Oh, I'll try this thing. They say, oh, that failed. I'm not going to try that thing. I'm going to try this thing. I'm going to see if this works better. They don't, in the case of sustainability, environment, climate, the global system that we're living in, we don't have time for secrets, and we don't have time for sometimes we don't have time for the marketing language. Fail fast, learn quickly, share that, and you move everybody forward with you. And I think that's when people talk about sustainability and a sustainable future, we're really, collaboration is something that sits at the heart of that. So yeah, I think it's that collaborative piece of saying, hey, this didn't work for us. these are the reasons why it didn't work for us. It might work for you because you're a different business or a different model, but here's our learnings. You can have that for free because
Yeah.
you might figure out a solution faster than us, then you can tell us.
Yeah.
And it becomes that exchange. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, just to pick up on it, I love, and I see that my friend Chance is loving that we don't have time for secrets, and we don't have time to compete with each other either. We need to be collaborative around all of this stuff. So just coming back to the original question as we're sort of kind of coming to our wrap up here, it feels to me like maybe it's not time to ditch the word sustainability, but we need to have a broader understanding of what that actually means. And we need to understand that it by itself is not an action-oriented word, and that we need to start taking actions in a different way. And so I'd love to just get your final thoughts on, kind of where you see the event industry at this point, what your vision is in terms of like what you'd like to see, coming down the road, and just any last thoughts that you might have.
I'd love to see the event sector I love the event sector. It's where I feel most at home. It's the place I always wanted to work, and I love the people in it. I love the kind of spirit and pace and project mindset and the get stuff done mindset. And I would love to see the sector put that energy into saying we can contribute to building a positive future for everybody.
Yeah.
And we are going to invest our time and energy into figuring out how we do that. Because we don't just want to put on events, we want to change the world. And an event can change the world. So I think I'd love to see that innovation, that creativity, and that aspiration, that excitement, and everything that the event industry is about kind of coming to the forefront to really champion that transformation that we need globally to like have a viable future for us. I want to be alive in 50 years' time and have a nice life. I don't want to be drinking filtered water through an army straw in a ditch somewhere because everything's burned to the ground.
Yeah. I think that, all of us who are working in sustainability would agree with that, and would agree that we would have loved to be, part of the solution or the solution, as opposed to being a part of the problem, which is unfortunately where a lot of the event industry still is at this point. So,
yeah.
So Anna, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, especially given that you're 8 hours ahead of us in the UK. I know that we're cutting into your evening. Be well, and this has been a great conversation, and I'm sure that we will continue to be in touch, and we'll continue to look for Trace to help us drive towards that net zero goal that we're all kind of seeking.
Thank you so much. I was really glad to be able to join you this evening.
All right.
Or this morning for you.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right. Thanks, Anna. All right. Again, thank you to our Patio Perspectives sponsor. Let's see who our winner is of our travel bag giveaway.
Our winner today, as I spin the wheel, is Katie Brown. Katie Brown is the winner today.
Well, congratulations, Katie. Thank you for joining. And thank you all for joining us today. I hope that this has been a useful conversation. These Patio Perspectives are something we're doing on an ongoing basis. So look for the next one, should be in October. And again, I just want to thank our sponsors overall for SFSE for 2023, the Clancy, the Beacon Grand, the One Hotel, the Harbor Court, Ozumo, Fairmont, and the Tonga Room. And we have some upcoming events. So check LinkedIn for topics, guest speaker announcements, and links. The two upcoming events are both live events. They are backstage tours of what these events are doing from a sustainability standpoint, starting with Workday Rising, which is an upcoming event coming up very, very soon. That event is on Wednesday, September 27th. I think we still have 8 tickets left for that event. And then Green Biz Verge, which is at the San Jose Convention Center. So hopefully some of you can make it down to the South Bay for that on October 24th at 3:30 p.m. So again, thank you so much for joining. We will see you next time. Everybody have a great day. Thanks a lot.